Okay, welcome back. So social media, my favorite topic here, is arguably promotes a type of psychopathy that hurts civil discussion. So the question is, what does it take to provide a solution? And we're seeing a spate of regulations, but I think that there's a seemingly simple but sadly missing element that we need to meaningful discourse, and this can bring truth, understanding, and civility back to society. So to find out my thoughts on this, stay tuned. Welcome to Assembly Unfiltered. I'm your host, Satchel, and co-founder of Assembly, the Learn to Earn platform. Assembly Unfiltered is a podcast about democracy, privacy, blockchain, politics, leadership, company culture, crypto, security, and startups. It's meant for anyone who believes that all of us are living in challenging, turbulent, and even exciting times. We're living in a moment ripe for dramatic change. We envision this as a podcast for our tribe, people who share an interest in how all these threads weave together for better communities. This is meant for our learners, voters, advertisers, civic organizations, tech geeks, developers, and employees. I hope you enjoy this episode of Assembly Unfiltered. Okay, so we kind of framed it up front as social media actually promotes a kind of psychopathy. And I think there needs to be a solution. And so the challenge for framing the solution is something that needs to actually work and produce an opposite result of social media. But at the same time, it needs to have some elements that are addictive and gamified to have the broad reach, which is what social media has done. So it needs to be different to have opposite results without foregoing some of the positive elements, which really was about its reach and engagement without falling down the negative side. So in order to do this, I wanted to kind of restate some of the core problems. Now, in other episodes, I've looked at the privacy, the issues of micro-targeting, the scope of misinformation, mispricing of ad space. All of those are factors which make social media the natural punching bag whenever talking about democracy, voting, and advertising. I'm going to focus here just on the nature of social media and what it does to discourse. And actually, it coarsens discourse by its very nature. So this is somewhat similar to my episode on Is Social Media the Problem? But I wanted to restate it in a different way to talk about the solution. So the first one is that emotions and vitriol rule. So in social media, it seems like whoever's the loudest can draw the biggest number of supporters or trolls, effectively demonize the other side with a meme or 140 character quote, they win. And that's the end of the conversation. That already should set off as it's a very bad framework. Why would there ever be a scenario where the person who's most upset, the loudest, the crudest, and the most aggressive ever be the right decision? And the converse is also true. What situations would be those that have more nuanced reasoning, a more quiet presence, that doesn't have as many supporters, be in fact ignored? So we can already see from the get-go, the very playing field of social media is already a failure to produce good decisions. The second one is they have to be algorithmically driven echo chambers. So set aside the unproductive trolling. It needs to push emotional, controversial, extremist content to move the needle to encourage engagement, which is time on site or active users. And so that results in a self-reinforcing narrative that draws content consumers down a given rabbit hole. But reinforcing just one side clearly has to be worse for decision making. So a better approach is, what is it that promotes antagonistic viewpoints in a way that fosters dialectic, which is a strange word, sounds very university, but it's basically a distillation of both sides to reach a more reasoned conclusion. In other words, a dialectic, as far as I can say, is a fancy way of saying that someone engages in a reasoned pro and con discussion. And it just doesn't happen on social media. There's too much free-for-all. Within 140 characters, and an overabundance of people who all think that their opinions are equally weighted, you get a lot of thought spam, opinions, insults, trolling, irrelevant commentary. And so I don't think an effective dialectic can work with 140 characters. It probably can work in the length of an op-ed piece, but it doesn't need to be a 50-page manifesto. In fact, verbosity actually hurts. I've read people who have thought pieces that are just really could be condensed into a handful of sentences when it's really just one big, long diatribe. That isn't helpful either. And so while dialectic sounds like something from a university class, just because the concept is old and stale and is probably used in traditional education, which is also old and stale, does not mean it can't be possible to apply rewards and gamification. But with that true north direction of we want dialectic's pro and con format with the goal of driving better understanding. So it does seem like a strangely simple idea. You have to have both sides apply reason to come to a conclusion. We know that social media doesn't support it when we set that aside. And so really the rest of this discussion is how do we come up with formats and incentives that actually drive a reasoned approach? I believe that when you remove the distraction and the public shaming, and your goal is how do we have people create better information from seeing both sides, that really starts to shift the entire architecture of how information and ads are presented, and also how our consumers consuming it. Dialectic, in the end, is the way people will get to a better decision for themselves. So it is actually frightening for some people. I spoke with some political operators and said, hey, this is a way for you to get your side out, but the opposite side will also share their perspective. And immediately the result is an instinctive, I don't want to participate in a platform that allows the other side to reach the people that I'm reaching. And I would push on that. I said, well, but all the people that you have are already in favor of your perspective. So what's the actual downside of them listening to the other side? You yourself at the beginning of our conversation had said, well, yeah, these people are all totally in favor of, fill in the blank issue. Why do you care about them seeing the other side? Isn't that actually in the end better? Shouldn't your arguments be able to anticipate and disprove any other side? And so the more you educate people and they're aware of the other side and they see both sides, they're more likely to evangelize on your behalf. Conversely, isn't being in the marketplace where your ideas are in the open such that the opponents can reach the same people that you're targeting with the opposing side? Doesn't the same thing work for you? Don't you want the platforms to be open so that you can reach those who aren't convinced of your side so that you can more readily persuade them? That feels like a better win-win for all, but you can already see that most of those who are staunch believers are cautious and averse to having different ideas exposed to them. And I think that actually is the underlying thing. Somebody who actually has a very strong position that they've reached through reason is less likely to be emotional. I heard this, and I'm probably going to butcher the quote, but they said when you're engaging an argument, when somebody gets emotional, it's because they don't have a good reason for their position to begin with. However, the person that is very calm and gentle and reasoned reach their conclusion with an abundance of thought and clarity and feel that they're standing on solid ground, not on sinking sand. They really have thought through it. And so I think that actually reveals quite a bit. The stronger your opinion is that you've had yourself, that you've reached through reason and an antagonistic approach, you're more likely to be confident and open to sharing and open to hearing opposing views. It is those that actually haven't reached it and are relying on their emotions only to have reached a given point of view that are going to only react emotionally when they hear something that's counterpoint, or when they're asked to justify their perspective, they get into an argument, accusatory approach because they never had a solid position to begin with. So I think when we pull back and say, look, whoever you are, whatever side you are, the platform's intended to be neutral. I want to be neutral on any given issue. other than let's restore truth, understanding, and civility. And the best way is for people to believe in the truth available in a dialectic. Now, if you look at your own issue